The grey interior of Marion Penitentiary was devoid of natural light as the warden walked the cell block. The air was still and slack as he approached the cell of one of the most dangerous men in the world. He rapped on the bars with his nightstick, the sounds echoing down the corridor. A thin man with a mess of brown hair got out of his bunk and stepped forward. His craggy features were adorned with a luxuriant moustache that would have been comical if it hadn't been for his eyes. Ice blue and merciless, the man knew why the warden had come. He was getting released. A thin smile crept up one side of his face, but didn't reach his eyes. His eyes held nothing anymore. They'd seen too much to be anything other than the dead eyes of a predator. His name was Viktor Bout, the Merchant of Death, and he was about to unleash hell on the world. Nobody really knows where Viktor Bout comes from. Officially, his record states that he was born in Dushanbe, the modern-day capital of Tajikstan under Soviet occupation. This has never been confirmed. We don't even know the date of his birth, for certain. What we do know is that his long and terrifying career has seen more movement of weaponry across more borders than even whole countries have managed. He specializes in selling the instruments of death to whomever will buy them, whether that's the governments of countries like the US, or people governed by fewer rules, even allegedly trading with the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. Before his dealings as an arms trader, we do know that he served in the Soviet Armed Forces, but details of his career are extremely vague. The only thing known for certain is that he graduated from the Soviet Military Institute of Foreign Languages. He had always had a talent for languages, mastering Esperanto at the age of 12, and using his military training to become an expert in Portuguese, English, Farsi, Arabic, and French. He would pick up more, such as Xhosa and Zulu, in his further career. Officially, this led him into working as a translator for the Soviet military, officially holding the rank of lieutenant. His career from then on is a mystery. Some sources say he achieved the rank of Lieutenant-Colonel, others that he went into other branches of the Soviet military. It has been suggested, though never officially confirmed, that he worked with GRU, Soviet Foreign Military Intelligence, the KGB, and the Soviet Air Forces. It is known that he was involved in a Soviet military operation in the Angolan Civil War, aiding the people's movement for the liberation of Angola. He remains tight-lipped about his involvement there, claiming to have only stayed a few weeks, somehow managing to pick up the Xhosa and Zulu languages in less than a month. It is generally assumed that he picked up the contacts he would allegedly use in his later smuggling contracts during this campaign. The reason we have to use the word allegedly is that Bout is an incredibly clever man. He has only ever been officially named the head of one company, SAS, which he founded after the collapse of the Soviet Union. He used his position to purchase 3 Soviet military aircraft and began to use them to transport freight in Liberia. He would quickly expand his operation into the rest of Angola, using his contacts to establish himself. Angola was the only country that allowed him to use some of his military-grade transports for civilian freight, an exemption he exploited to transport everything from flowers to African heads of state. He also expanded his operation into Afghanistan, transporting small arms and ammunition for the pre-Taliban government of the country. He claims never to have been involved with Al-Qaeda or the Taliban themselves, but this claim has been called into question after Al-Qaeda began smuggling large quantities of gold and cash out of the country. Bout managed to keep his hands clean of this, but there are few others who had the contacts and the capability to have pulled it off. The CIA had begun to take serious interest in his dealings. Throughout the globe, wherever bloodshed reared its head, Bout never seemed to be far away. He was linked to small arms smuggling into the Liberian civil wars, the Angolan civil wars, the Lebanon wars, and the Yugoslav wars. Every one of these conflicts, rife with human rights abuses, was undertaken with weapons linked to his smuggling operation. Without Bout, The machine guns that committed the Bosnian genocides couldn't have crossed the borders, yet he remained unchallenged by the UN. This may have been because he was useful. The US used Bout to airlift $60 million worth of supplies to their troops, calling him a linchpin to their operation. Unfortunately for Bout, his powerful contacts couldn't protect him forever. In the early 2000s, Bout's activities brought him to the attention of Interpol, with the Belgian government requesting Interpol issue a notice for money laundering. A warrant for his arrest was produced, but eventually was dismissed due to his lack of permanent residence in Belgium. Bout was nigh on impossible to nail down. According to the CIA, he holds at least 4 different passports and has had residence in more than 6 countries. He continually re-registers the aircrafts his companies use. As stated earlier, he has only officially been named the head of one of them. Building a case against him was like hunting a ghost. Only a ghost would have left them with a better paper trail. Even in Angola, where SES Air had been operating for several years, it was nearly impossible to lock down any significant evidence against him. The Central African Republic tried him in absentia for the forging of documents that allegedly allowed his craft to transport arms and ammunition into the Western African states. But all charges were eventually dropped. It became clear that if Bout was to be brought down, Interpol were going to have to drop to his level. According to joint intelligence from the Kenyan and US governments, Bout's network was allegedly involved in supplying the surface-to-air missiles used by Al-Qaeda operatives in an attack on an Israeli airliner in 2002. Whilst the claim had never been substantiated, it gave the US DEA paid informer an idea. Claiming to be working for FARC, a Colombian rebel group, he negotiated the sale of more surface-to-air missiles and rocket launchers with Bout, inviting the arms dealer to meet him in Thailand for an introduction to the head of the organization. If they could get Bout to show up, it would implicate him in a conspiracy to provide material support or resources to a designated foreign terrorist organization and kill US nationals and US officers and employees. It would be enough for an arrest, with a view to extraditing him to the US to be properly charged. The trap was set. Bout took the bait, resulting in his arrest by the Royal Thai Police on the 6th of March, 2008. That was only the beginning of the process, however. Bout clearly had powerful friends in Russia, as the country immediately protested that the arrest was a political move by America, opposing Bout's extradition to the US. Alleged links to the Russian intelligence community, and, some said, even with the Deputy Prime Minister Igor Sechin, secured a protracted campaign against his arrest. With the pressure placed upon them, the Thai courts took 2 years to eventually get Bout's extradition order through. Even when it was accomplished, Russia staged massive protests, eventually banning US officials involved in his trial from attaining Russian entry visas. Bout was put on trial in Manhattan in 2011 and sentenced to 25 years in prison the following year. The prosecution successfully showed that he had planned to sell weapons to a foreign terrorist organization, although Bout himself couldn't see an issue with his actions, arguing that he held as much responsibility for the deaths committed with his weaponry that American gun shop owners did for the deaths of those killed with their wares. His legal team attempted to imply he was a political prisoner throughout the trial, and whilst this didn't save him from prison, the judge did give him the minimum sentence, as no evidence was provided that he intended to sell to terrorist groups outside of the sting operation. He would eventually end up serving only 10 years of his sentence after being exchanged for WNBA player Brittany Griner. She had been arrested by Russian customs for bringing cannabis oil into the country and faced a maximum 10-year prison sentence. The trade took place on 8th of December 2022, with Bout released back to Russia. Since then, he has pledged support for the war in Ukraine and offered to volunteer if given the chance. His fervour seems to have won him favour within Russian politics, as he is currently being put forward as a candidate in the Legislative Assembly elections for Ulyanovsk Oblast by the far-right party LDPR. Given his description as one of the most dangerous men on the face of the earth by the US Chief of Operations for the Drug Enforcement Administration, We can only hope that the Merchant of Death doesn't live up to his moniker.